Hey, this is Pops with another idea that I thought I'd throw out there while I was looking. I found this thing floating around out in the shop. Obviously, it's a piece of a broken bolt that was in the hub of my 500 case, 500B. Now, what's my point here? What I wanted to do is, for some of you that don't realize what you can do. Now, to get bolts out like this that had been heated and treated and everything else, and they weren't going to move because they were rusted in place in two ways. One is just plain rust, which is rough, crude, abrasive, that'll hold it and lock it in place, but also it swells, so these things stick. Well, this one stuck in there and I couldn't get it out. So what did I do? Okay, from this side you'll see I drilled a hole all the way through it. Now, being that this was 7/16, I think I ended up drilling a 3/8 hole that made it fairly thin. That's what you see from this end. You see one side here is thin all the way through. What I had done, and you see it's oblong, I took a die grinder with a small burr and kept working out. And on one side I got through, and you could just see the crown of the thread, internal crown. Just see it, cleaned it up and down until I could collapse it. You say you'll damage the threads. Yeah, you might. This one happened to have a little bit of it hanging out there so I could start to fold it. But even then, you'll get a little bit of damage in the top part of the threads if you take a round chisel has a flat point and grind it at an angle so that it's like a round chisel. Put that in there, backside to taper to bring it out, and lift it. And once you start lifting this thing, you can compress it, and that's what this is. It got to a certain point where I could just drive it right out of there gently without causing any further damage to any of the threads in there. I did that 3 times successfully. Easy out wouldn't work, and people say it always works, heat always works, this always works. No, it doesn't. Nor will it. There are so many different things and places out there that to get nuts and bolts out, you say, why don't you weld a nut to the top of it? Well, because these are old-fashioned lug bolts, and the problem with these is they're grade 8 or higher in a true grade 8, and the weld gets brittle and breaks off quite often. So none of that worked because it was in there too tight. Period. End of story. And I didn't, my MIG welder isn't designed, it's designed for small stuff. That's why I bought it. And a stick, well, stick is awful hard to make work welding down inside a nut, let me tell you. So yes, you can sometimes, but this was in deep enough that I drilled it, got it out. Didn't take long either, but it did take time. Half hour or so per. So you blow 2 hours, probably in 3 of them total. But never count it out, because if you get an 1/8 inch die grinder even, get that little bugger to get in that hole and grind on either side. Take your time, because 1/8 inch, they don't hold well. But they will go down that 3/8 hole. And you'll clean that one side up, and then you'll pull it out, let it cool off, and retighten it. Go down the other side. And when you just start seeing threads, you can even start from the top or the bottom, whichever is easier to see, because you can go on the hub. I could go from the back side. And just start working. And when you see the threads, you know you're close. Then stop when you see the thread. Then go down and do it a little further until you're all the way down through. On one side, just shiny little pieces of thread showing. Fold it in. It'll come out. No, whoever tells you dogmatically that this is the only way to remove broken bolts, they're a fool. Don't listen. Don't listen to the part that this is the only way. They may have a good way. If you have the appropriate equipment, you might have been able to weld something on top of that, but there wasn't enough heat in the world in this case to do that. I would have destroyed the hub if I'd have put that much heat on there. So you don't. They say it only used it. As soon as they just talk to somebody that knows what they're doing. Just listen to what you can out of there, what their procedure is. I've heard wax 1,000 times, never used it, ever. Penetrating oil has always worked well. Why use wax? If it works, keep using it. That's not something I've ever seen work. Ever! And I hit, it works every time! No, it doesn't. No. It doesn't. So I've seen so many things, and if you have a good MIG welder, I mean something capable of 100 amps plus, and even a wire cord feed that you can get right down in there, because mine might work sometimes, but I bought it to do stuff 1/8 inch, 3/16, and that's about it. It's all I wanted it for, just simple stuff. And it might work here and there, but usually I don't even bother to try because there's some other way that I can get that out. Always is. And there's other times I've seen things that people would weld nuts to try and get them out. What a fool. We did one the other day. You could have welded a nut to that all day long, and it wasn't happening. We had ourselves a 12-pound maul and a long wrecking bar. It would have been better with a shorter bar. It would have been a lot better, but that's all we had at the time. I came up with a punch and a 2-pound hammer. What was that going to do for what we were working on? Nothing. We really had to pound on that thing, and it took a lot of heat. Once we got it moving, it was all free, broke up, came out. It's all fine. But don't let anybody tell you this always works. So that's one person never to listen. Seriously, the person says always works is somebody never to listen to. Sounds strange? Because if somebody else tells you that those easy outs never work, that's another fool never to listen to. They're fools. There's no other way to put it. Because there's too many ways that will change in different circumstances. The MIG welder and a nut, I've done it. I did it on one of them. I think it was 21 bolts in a track frame on a 30-something-year-old Komatsu dozer. I'd take the frames off, turn them upside down, and that's what I did. I cleaned them off. I had to keep, each time I attempted, some of them 5 times each, so I didn't have to drill them. I was trying to protect the hole. It was old. And I would clean the top off and start again. Clean it off, start again. There was 1 or 2 of them that I actually had to build a divot into the nut. But you only come into the nut so far to keep the divot as small and as short as possible, and so that the biggest part of the weld is in the nut and transfers the heat as much as possible. And then most of them I actually hit with water until they were stone cold. Why? Well, because the surrounding metal is a lot hotter. Okay? But you cool the surrounding metal easier than you do the bolt. Get that cold and then let the bolt cool and shrink away from it. But the basic idea is whichever way it works, one or the other is going to cool at a different rate and break that loose, and they'll finally come out. Half of them came out so hard, that's why I ended up making 3, 4, and 5 attempts, because it comes so far and stop, snap, so you start again. It's going to take a while to drill the hole out, and like I found out twice, I drilled the hole down through so I'd have something to weld onto, and it split the bolt. Having a hollow bolt to take out. Oh, got right in there, welded nice. Beautiful. Took, zip, look at that. And then I looked, and there's half the bolt in there still. So what do you do then? You do what I did. You grind the side out, you peel it in, and punch it out. Multiple ways to do things that can work. Experiment. Don't use a MAP gas or a propane torch. Well, sometimes it works because the bolt's stuck and it has Loctite on it. 300 degrees, and the Loctite is powder, and it'll come out. Not all of it. There's some that's designed never to come out. You have to force it loose. But a lot of Loctite, just heat it up and it'll come out. Propane torch or MAP gas works great. MAP is better by far, and they also have turbo torches with propane that's almost MAP gas heat. And the biggest thing is a small torch is high temperature, small heat. A big torch is the same temperature, but more heat in BTU, total heat. Okay? It's like throwing, how can you say it? It's like throwing a golf ball sized snowball. That's one thing. They're both the same thing, a snowball. Throw one this big and see the damage it causes. That's the same idea. So, there you go. Have fun with it. This is Pops. Peace out. Signing off.